I'm Amy.
I'm Wendell.
And I'm Patrick.
And
this is
Yes,
But Why?
Podcast.
Thank you so much, Will, for joining us for the podcast. Really glad that you were able to take time out of your day to chat with me. We met on a screenwriting Facebook group. So tell me, you're a screenwriter. What does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, thanks, Amy, for having me on your podcast. And, what's a screenwriter mean to me? That was a question.
Yeah, like what does it mean to you that you're starting to write screenplays? Like how is it, what do you think of your career at this moment?
Right now, it's just I'm at a phase where I'm trying to get things going. I've been writing on my own for about 10 years. And I've been here in Los Angeles for about almost 6 years. So just making different connections and things like that. To me, screenwriting is just to me anyway, it's a really cheap outlet to go ahead and express yourself. That's why to me, it's just extremely easy to jump into that kind of career path as opposed to like learning other different fields in filmmaking specifically. But my ultimate goal is really to be a writer and a director. So I'm working on the director part as well. But in the meantime, while I was doing kind of odd jobs here and there on the side, whenever I have any kind of free time, I just jump into screenwriting just to really I have an idea. Now I got to figure out how to express it. And then once I fully flesh it out, now it's a matter of, okay, how can I make this better? So that's what the process has been for me. And that's what it's been like so far.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me know the times that you've been writing and in LA because those were totally questions of mine. When you first started writing, did you find that screenplays were what made you feel most comfortable, where you felt like you could express yourself best?
Yeah, definitely. Because when I was a kid, I actually used to do comic books. I took these notebook paper, loose leaf paper, and I would just draw a board grid, and then I would just draw comics that way, just little cartoon characters. And then I carried that on to high school. So I started kind of writing and drawing, and then later on I tried doing just writing, but I found that kind of hard at first in free form kind of novel writing. So I couldn't really figure out how I can keep doing it without getting bored. So I would always just give up that way. Specifically, though, when I was in college trying to figure out what I wanted to do, that's when, I've always liked watching movies as a kid and TV shows, and then later on web series, which is what I'm into now. So I always liked that kind of visual type of entertainment. I thought I'd like to get into that. That'd be a really interesting way of trying to do something different as opposed to just drawing or trying to write something out of thin air. So in college, that's when I started watching, mostly my movies from my favorite directors from the past. But then I was starting to get really into newer directors and newer writers. And I started realizing, well, I could just go ahead and just start this. So I got a couple of screenplays that I pulled from the internet. And at the time, I was really into Juno. I was really into Inglourious Bastards, Pulp Fiction, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I pulled those scripts, and I realized very quick, because I thought you had to write a script a certain way. Because growing up, I saw you have to do it in this kind of way, and it looked kind of boring and kind of formulaic, and I was I don't know if I want to do that. But then I saw how these people did it, and these people got picked up because of their writing style. I'm like, oh wow, this is more interesting to read. This is more interesting to write. So I thought I'll do it like this. And so I started kind of going from there, and from there I was I just find it pleasurable to write in the screenplay format. I'm trying to get into a novel now, but it's kind of hard for me because I'm so used to writing in the screenplay format, because I just found a knack, and it just worked for me from there.
No, that's fascinating. It's funny. I think the novel writing month that they have, they sent I'm on the mailing list or whatever, and I got an email from them where they're like, listen, just use the time to write whatever you'd like. And I'm like, yeah, they're losing people that are writing novels, and they're like, just write literally anything just for this month. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I used to be like, I don't want to write a novel, no, but I'll write other stuff. So yeah, I'm so excited that not only are you did you work on screenwriting and it like helped find sort of joy in that, but even though novels are tough for you, you're like, I'm doing it. I'm gonna try. Why did you
Oh yeah,
decide to go into that format?
uh,
The
screenwriting
novel.
format.
No,
Oh, the
no, like
novel.
why did
Oh,
you decide to go into it even though you've tried it before and it wasn't for you?
I think it's really because of the screenwriting, and at the time too, like I was doing web comics in high school. I went from 4 grid comic books to web comics, and at that time they did this thing where you took these things called sprites, which are little video game characters from like Mega Man and Sonic the Hedgehog and things like that. They took these video game sprite characters and you could put them into comics and things like that. And that's when I started developing narrative from there. And that really helped out a lot, figuring out different voices and things like that. So by the time I got into scripts, I applied that to the long form of that. And recently, I wrote a script. It's a TV pilot spec that I wrote, and I got some feedback on it. And I'm like, I mean, like I thought like the idea is great, but it's not where it needed to be. And so I just decided. It just struck my mind where I'm like, just like, why not just take this and just adapt into a novel? Because if I do that, then maybe I could flesh out the world more, and then I could figure out the characters better. And then when I go back to the script, I'll apply those new changes that came to me into the script, and then I'll just resubmit it. And I actually started writing 65 pages of the novel. It's like halfway there.
Wow.
And as a matter of fact, it's just kind of sitting there. I need to finish it, but I realized by doing that, by making different chapters, I took what I already wrote as a template for the pilot, and then I expanded upon it, and I figured out so much more of my main character by doing that.
Nice.
And I realized, like, oh wow, I mean, this is to me a great way to expand upon that. But all that stuff just came from my comic book background, really, because the idea of expanding a character came from, well, I don't have to really write a really long period of time. I could just draw a picture, have them say a couple things, maybe there's a conflict here and there, and then go from there. And then I expanded that from there, expanded it. So everything is just really an expansion. Even though currently my craft is screenwriting, I like to think of it more as like I'm just really expanding my interest in the arts in general, because I'm interested in a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And just currently my focus is on screenwriting because, like I said, I find it very pleasurable. And I do want to evolve into a visual medium as far as me translating that as a director, with my team of people that I've, met, befriended over the years, especially here in LA.
Yeah. You mentioned that comic books were a big inspiration for you. When you first started writing, and even now when you write screenplays, do you start with a storyboard first? Like, do you imagine it visually before you put pen to paper as far as like words?
Yeah, I do. I don't do storyboards. When it comes to scripts, I don't do storyboards. I just really visualize it in my head, as vividly as I can. And, every so often, if it happens, I play a stenographer. Honestly, I would see a vivid image of what's going on, and I would capture it as quickly as I can, either if I have a physical pen and paper or a notebook, or from my computer, and I just type it out, or if I even just jump straight to the screenplay. There was one script that I wrote a few years ago, and now I submitted to the Nickel Fellowship, and I'm hoping for the best for that. But that script, thank you. That script came to me when I came to LA before I started living here. I just came here to do a little part in a movie, and then I it was my first time being on a professional movie set, and I was just so enamored by the whole experience, and I just saw how messed up everything was behind the scenes and how nothing worked and how people were frustrated. And I was just like, and instead of being discouraging, I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I took that experience with me, and I took a film class. It was like a 2-day crash course class, and I heard the instructor tell us, oh yeah, there are these rules, but you don't have to do those rules. And he was teaching us the shortcuts. Just hearing like that kind of like demeanor and those kind of tricks, and seeing it unfold inspired me to write a whole script. I wrote the first 26 pages in the first sitting because of all those experiences, and it just really vividly came to me. So, and I was just like typing, and before I knew it, I think I finished that thing in like a week or two,
That's
because I had the
awesome.
whole thing. Yeah, so that's but that's just one example. A lot of the times it's just like I have a cool idea, but I need to figure out how to make it happen. So I would do an outline. Sometimes I would just write a script either at the ending or the middle or whatever. I jump all over the place. It really is the case by case kind of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like that the one that you've recently written was inspired by other creative things that you were doing. Super fun that, you got the opportunity to act in a movie and then were able to see what was going on. That's really great, especially when you're trying to write for it. You're like, how intensely do I need to write? And you're like, oh, this is the world that I'm putting my words into. So it's nice that you got to experience that. Do you do any other like creative, workshops or stuff like that? I mean, you said the film crash course. Do you do like any writing workshops or heck, any other sort of like artistic workshops to get your mind going?
Yeah, I did a couple when I first came here to LA because I was always planning on coming here. I'm originally from Texas, deep South
Mhm.
Texas, the Rio Grande Valley.
Mhm.
So, and then I went up to San Antonio, Texas to do a college, and then I worked there for a little bit. And from there, I was saving up money and I drove all the way to LA. My dad also helped me, make the trek over here. So, and then I started living here from there. So, um, if from there, once I got here, that's when I took a couple of courses on creative producing, and I took a screenwriting course. It was for TV pilot creation. And then I
That's
took
great.
an acting class, not because I'm interested in acting, but because I needed to know if I'm going to be really a writer and a director, especially a director, I have to figure out what it's like to be an actor. I took that tip, and one of the biggest things I learned too is like always look up your heroes, look at what they did, and not necessarily heroes, but people whose work you admire. Like I'm not a huge Sam Raimi fan, but I really do like, Spider-Man and a couple of the Evil Deads. And when I looked into what he did, I just copied that method. One of the things he did was just like I wanted to be I became an actor because I wanted to know what it was like to be an actor, and then as a director, I'll know how to apply those things I learned. And that's what I was like, oh, he did that. Let me do that. So that's what I was doing. So from that, I learned acting. I took that TV pilot course, and then I did that creative producing. And I only did the creative producing really so I can get a gig, and it helped me get a job that lasted about almost 4 years.
That's great.
So yeah, so I think it's important to go ahead and partake in these kind of things, especially if you're like
Yeah.
in Los Angeles or New York or one of the hubs, entertainment hubs of the world, and especially the people that you meet and the connections you'll make, and it's incredibly invaluable.
Absolutely. Well, I think every artist should constantly be working on not only their own personal craft, but like being more creative. So I love the fact that you're like constantly educating yourself with all sorts of different things, both that help you directly and that will help you indirectly. I love the idea of taking an acting course to help you be a better director. Thank you, because I teach acting courses and I'm totally selling
There
it
you go.
that way now.
It also
But
helps as a writer. It helps as a writer tremendously as well because you get to say dialogue out loud, and then it's one thing to write something, especially
Mhm.
dialogue, and it's another thing to say it. And
Yeah.
you know it's and that's also incredibly helpful, and it helps get something, that naturalistic kind of vibe which everyone's trying to strive for.
Yeah, I teach a sketch comedy writing class, and whenever we get to the recital part and people are reading the students' words out loud, they're like, they're not saying it right. And I was like, and this is
Yeah.
where your lesson is, deal with that.
Yeah, no, that's entirely true. It is
Like,
entirely true.
yeah, it's like maybe they're not, but they're the ones who have to say it. So,
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and that's and again, it's just like, especially for anyone listening, it's just really the most valuable thing you could really learn is all the behind the scenes stuff, all the interview stuff, stuff
Mhm,
like this
mhm.
podcast, interviews. you really need to learn how that person got to where they are. And even if it's something that you love so much and you think like, oh, it must have been a cakewalk. It was a dream to get through. No, it was hell on earth. I assure you, it was not easy to get there. And it took many, many tries. Like, classic example, I always fall back on this, and just about a lot of people know about it, is the whole Star Wars story. You know, how that inspires me to this day. Just the idea of how that the actual film, the first film, I love to death. It's a great film. A lot of people love it, but it's just when you look at the behind the scenes of that, you know, people thought the dialogue sucked. They didn't understand the story. They thought it was weird. Everyone kept telling George Lucas, "Oh, you're going to be a failure," and this and that. And you're like, "Oh my God, this is horrible." The guy actually got like hypertension because he was just getting so stressed out. He was going to get a stroke or something, probably. I was like, "Oh my God." But then when you see the end result, it's like, okay, well, it paid off. And that's just a really rare example of something like that going through and paying off, but it's still inspirational to hear. And just to hear like, the classic lines like, "Oh, may the force be with you." At some point they were like, what the hell does that mean? This sucks. You know, it's just stupid. What is the force? And his direction was always like, well, just read it the way I wrote it. And it's just like, what does that mean? And I think Harrison Ford is quoted as famously saying, "George, you can type this shit, but you sure as hell can't say it." You know, it's like, and that's true for any writer, really. You know, just because you wrote it, it's like going back to what you were saying, really.
Yeah, it's really, it's great to think of those scenarios where there's somebody that we know has great success, but we hear about how they had to go through it, where their friends or people that were working with them were like, "I don't think this is going to work." You just got to trust your gut and keep going, especially if you trust your creative impulse, then, you got to keep pushing forward with it, make it happen, especially when you're making it on your own. It's one thing to take a screenplay and sell it and give it to somebody else and let them do whatever they want to it. But he wrote it and then made it and was like involved in all of the creation of it. So it's like, that's his baby. And, the hard work paid off. The dedication paid off. So
definitely.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, the most important lesson from that too is just, be optimistic, but also be realistic.
Sure.
That's especially when that's something I really learned, especially coming here,
Yeah,
it's
I was
just
gonna
like,
ask.
mm-hmm.
I mean,
Oh,
with
about
reference to, that specifically, like, since you've moved to LA, have there been like any or many instances of like just like reality like smacking you in the face? Like, it's nice that you like this kid, but bam, this is tough stuff.
Oh,
What do you find? What do
oh
you got?
God, so many instances. The first, I'm just not going to name names or scenarios.
No. Just a vague
Definitely
story
not.
if you have one.
Yeah, but I got a couple. I'll keep them short. But yeah, the first instance is coming here. Person I worked for was very much a jaded person, worked in the industry for a very long time. And I was very enthusiastic coming fresh from Texas. And I was just like, I got this great idea. And he was just like, and he was very, very eccentric individual. But at one point he was just like, "You don't understand filmmaking." And he was waving his arms in the air. He's being very theatrical. "You don't understand it. It takes many years. It can't be done. It can't. And he would leave, and I would leave the room with that tirade. And I was like, what just happened? What, are people like this here?
God.
It turned out, some people are kind of like that here. I mean, because I come across people where I get into collaboration with, either as a writing thing or we were going to do a short film or something like that. And the person would always be exceedingly negative. Like, I would say, "Why don't we try this?" "Oh, you can't do that because of X, Y, and Z." Well, why don't we do this then?" "Well, you can't do that because of A, B, C." "Well, what about that?" "No, D, E, F." "Oh, okay, then how about let's just talk about how we can't do it then." And then they would blow up on my face. "I'm just trying to be helpful," and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So I had my share of people that are just like, they have this attitude, and probably because they were beat down from other people as a result, this is just how they deal with it.
Yeah.
They try to do something, reality hits them, they end up they're not sure how to take it, and they over time, because they haven't accomplished their goals or their dreams, they become very, very bitter people from what I witnessed. And and I've been out here working my thing off and on, and I'm by no stretch of the imagination successful at what I'm doing as far as I haven't made a sale or anything yet, but I'm still optimistic. I'm still well, I'm not there yet. That's always my way of thinking. And then I just use that knowledge to go on to the next thing. Okay, I finished writing the screenplay. I did everything I needed to do with it. What's the next thing? Oh, I'm interested in this. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And then occasionally I would have projects where I'm like, well, it's not where I want it to be. I'll set this aside for now. Let me take my mind off that. I'll move on to the next thing. That's always been my point of view. It's I'll either finish it or I'll put it aside and I'll just move on. And then sooner or later, I'll end up finding the people that, where we feel like we jive well. I met this great guy, actually. He was he's an actor. He's a lot of different things. He's a good writer. He's a good actor. And he's always getting beat down as well. He's always getting constantly negative feedback and things like that. But he just takes that in stride and is just like, well, I'll learn from this and I'll try to learn the lessons from it, and I do the next thing. So he and I met. He understands fully what the hell's going on around here. And we jive really well. He's great at contributing dialogue and things like that. He's great at acting on certain things that I've seen him in. So it's important that once you get out here, there is negativity, but just, if you really love what you're going to do, you'll shake it off and you'll learn from it. Most importantly, you won't be ignorant to what they're saying. You would understand that's the attitude around here, and try to find people that are like-minded, people that are optimistic, but also realistic.
Yeah, I find there's a lot of negativity in people who spend a lot of time doing creativity because I like to describe it like doing this kind of stuff is like trying to embrace the chaos. Like it's insane and nothing makes sense. And you think there's a rule where if this happened last time, surely it'll happen this time. But no, there's no possible way to really wrangle it in. And you have to just be okay with that. And a lot of people are not. A lot of people are like, but wait, this is how it should work. I mean, I think that's a challenge to live your full life in creativity, is to be able to maintain that positivity. And you're right, also find friends who you can connect with, who you guys can build projects together, and it's not too difficult to get the work done because they're so negative. Oh man.
Definitely.
That must be wild. So you said you're and you can share as much or not. You worked on some web series. Have you done acting, directing, and writing in web series? Or when you mentioned web series earlier, was that because you're enjoying watching a few right now and they're inspiring you?
Oh, I'm just enjoying watching them. Inspiring, and not necessarily just web series too. Just like nowadays, I watch news stuff. I watch skits, viral videos. That's the world we live in today. I mean, it's important to keep up to date as far as what's kind of in, as far as what's out there theatrically, what's there on on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime or whatever. And there are a lot of different platforms like that. So. Yeah, but as far as me working on a web series, I'm not working on anything like that. I am helping a friend, though, with a pitch, something that she wrote in conjunction with someone else. They didn't jive well. Then we met, and I liked the idea. I liked her original approach. What she wrote, what they were working on was like some sort of a drama, some sort of a weird kind of a drama. But what she really wanted to do was a comedy. So she came to me, she told me about it, and she was expressing the frustrations, and I was like, hey, I like the idea. Why don't we take a stab at it together? So she wrote it. I'm helping her write it, and it's becoming a pitch, and she would love for it to be a web series. So that's the ultimate ambition. So we are collaborating in something like that.
Right.
So that's the closest thing I got. Other than that, everything I've been doing is either shorts or screenplays for feature films or TV shows.
Do you go to like writers events to meet these other writers? You said you guys like met each other. Was it at like a writers mixer or something like that where you met other people that were working on projects? How do you meet other
Uh,
writers and work creatively with them?
I'll give a shout out to him. The man I was talking about is Rocco Bovo, the guy who I think is a great writer and director that we collaborate on. We met actually because I cast him in a short film that's meant to be a pitch for the feature film that we're working on together now. So that's how we met. He was just an actor, very, very enthusiastic, very supportive, and now he's a partner on the project. But through him, he's just a great networker. He knows how to network with people. So from him, we went to Beyond Fest, we went to the AFI Fest, and those kind of events. When I first came here to LA, I did go to a couple on my own. One of them was the Blacklist. It was the Blacklist kind of a Q&A session. So from there, we met a couple of writers, we met a couple of people and things like that. So yeah, I went to a couple, but I don't go to too many these days. Nowadays, I just I work on my craft, and because now I'm in a period where I have free time, so that's what I'm really spending a lot of my time on, just making sure. Because it's one thing where if you get connections, that's great. If you have people to pass your material to, that's fantastic. But you got to make sure that material is your very best material. Otherwise, you're kind of blowing smoke up people's ass, and it's and if you get your material out to all these people and they all say the same thing, like, well, great, but then it's like, well, you should spend more time on your craft, I think. So that's just my approach. Everyone's got a different approach, but that's my approach, where I'm just making sure I have my material pretty much ready to go.
Yeah.
From different genres as well, because I'm interested in so many different things. But primarily I've been working on comedy. I felt like that was my strongest suit, but I'm also working on sci-fi, also a thriller and an action film, just a couple of different things, and making sure they're the very best scripts in that genre as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like one thing I keep hearing when I hear other screenwriters talk about it is pretty much just to write the movie you want to see. And then
Hmm.
hopefully that works itself out. And I often think that when I'm doing rewrites of my own screenplays, like, okay, how do I need to change this? If I were watching this movie, at what point would I be like, no, and turn it off? So
That's really hard.
yeah, editing can be super hard. Since you're in a time right now that you are spending most of your time working on writing, what kind of schedule do you give yourself? Like, what kind of, like, tell me how you get your writing done. Is it like all in the morning? Do you do like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5? How do you organize it for yourself so you get the work done?
I sleep in through the morning, so I get everything done at night.
Okay, great.
So that's just my process. I
Sure.
prefer, like, I'm in my desk area right now, my work area in my apartment. So
Hmm.
I have my setup, and what I usually do is I just play Spotify. I just pick a list. I pick a set of songs, listen to over and over. There's usually, I like to think everyone goes through this too, but every so often I find a song that I really, really like,
Hmm.
and it gets me thinking, and then I play that song obsessively over and over again
Yeah.
until I get tired of it, and then I move on to the next one. And sometimes I have a group of songs that are like that. So my process is really just finding a playlist of music that I like to listen to, just kind of like walk around, think about it, and then just kind of like start writing either the script or the outline. Sometimes I do character bios. There's a script that I'm working on now. The latest script I'm working on is a thriller, and I just did a character kind of like breakdown sheet. Um, and then I'm writing. I have the script on one end, and I have a text pad on the other on the computer, and I just write all the changes, like this doesn't work, that doesn't work. So I usually do that like at night, because my place is really quiet. I have two roommates, and they're busy doing their own thing, so it kind of feels like I'm on my own.
Yeah.
So usually what I do, and it's the most relaxing. But occasionally, what I like to do is I like to take the laptop or my notebook or a notepad or whatever, and go out to the coffee shops.
Sure.
Because sometimes it feels good to be out there and to watch other people or to hear the ambiance, the noise, and all that stuff. Sometimes that helps me.
Yeah, whenever I'm in a
So
Starbucks, I'm like, oh, look at all the people writing the great American novel.
I know, right? You'd just be like, that person's gonna go somewhere. You can tell, and it's actually
Yeah,
like
maybe.
it's a kind. Yeah, they could. It's
You don't
possible.
know.
You
Yeah.
know. Yeah, and that's also kind of inspirational to see too. Especially like I'm in a place. I'm in the arts district in North Hollywood, and that is really cool because you get to see all kinds of different artists, doing their thing. You get to see, dancers or writers or actors or models, directors and producers and whatever, editors, and see them all do their thing, sometimes out in the open on their laptops. That's just so inspirational to see.
Yeah, fun, right? You're like, they're like
Mhm.
me. They need a latte before they can write their character bios too.
I know, right? With 4 shots of espresso in it,
Right?
just to get them going.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, so when we first connected, it was through the screenwriting Facebook group, like I mentioned, and you had
Hmm.
mentioned that you were out having a meeting with somebody. Now, I know that LA is just meeting, 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 all sorts of different kind of meetings. How do you get to that step? How do you go from I'm sitting writing stuff to somebody wants to read it or somebody wants to be my agent? How do you connect with those people? Are you meeting them at these networking events or are you meeting them through friends? How did it happen for you? And if you know of anybody else's story and it's different, how might it have happened for friends of yours? It just always baffles me, like, how do you get there to that spot?
It's in any way you can. A couple of the gigs I got were actually from Tinder, believe it or not.
Ah, that is
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah, believe me. I mean, I
Oh
read a
my
thing from a guy.
God.
Yeah, I read a thing from a guy a while ago where he said like he was a writer, I believe, but when he first came to LA, he was just like, I was just going out on dates. This is before Tinder. I was just going on dates, meeting girls at bars, and she became a manager, and then she ended up repping me. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought that would happen with me, um, but I went on a couple dates with a couple girls, and one of them was a producer, and she owns her own company, and she's doing her 4th feature film right now. Um, yeah, she got me a couple of gigs through there, and from there I met her partner, her writing directing partner, and we're friends on Facebook. Um, so and it just keeps going on like that, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's just as simple as a date, and you just like you just talk to people, you get a feel. Maybe if it doesn't work out as as a girlfriend or boyfriend kind of a deal, sometimes other things can happen. Like, well, we'll stay friends, and sometimes that's not code word for let's never talk again. Sometimes that's
Sure.
like, no, let's legitimately keep in touch because you got stuff going, I got stuff going. Let's make stuff happen together, and sometimes that happens. But
That's
I think
awesome.
the most important, yeah, the most important thing really is to put yourself out there. Don't just hole yourself in your room, put a couple of locks in there on the door, and just be there. Don't talk to me. It's just like, yeah, you can be antisocial maybe to a point when it comes to writing because you need that kind of like time to yourself. But at some point you gotta get outside, get a little sunshine and just meet people any way
Yeah.
possible. I mean,
Interesting.
my friend Rocco in particular, he just meets people like on the street. He just talks to people. I'm not so much of a talker in real life, like in terms of out there in the streets. I'm just like, hi, how you doing? That kind of little thing. He's just straight up like talking up a storm. He's just one of those guys. He hustles, and he just like meets all kinds of people and gets all kinds of connections. So by virtue of me being his friend, he helps by extension, introduce me to people and things like that, and just hook me up with people. And for me, as a guy who doesn't talk as much, that's just such a godsend, because I know there are a lot of writers
Interesting.
out there too that they're just not talkers. We
Yeah.
internalize, we save a lot of that energy for the page. We don't necessarily want to waste that energy or use that energy to do other things, that don't involve writing or those kind of introverted kind of activities. But it does pay to go out there and just kind of like live the mantra of we only live once. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah.
Just try it.
That's fascinating. For the introverts potentially listening, just figure it out, get an extrovert friend, and then go out together. They can help you out,
Exactly.
right?
That's the key.
Man, that is so
That's the
wild.
key.
Yeah, it's just sort of like a social situation. You just happen to meet people. That's fascinating. As far as you mentioned
Mhm.
earlier that you had submitted to like a screenplay contest. Have you ever known anybody who got anything from one of those? Like got an agent or got connections in some way? I mean, I've met people through festivals and, friendly people, but never anyone that was like, "Oh, they got an agent through it." Have you ever heard that?
From those competitions, personally, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to think, but I don't think I know anyone personally that's gotten that kind of a gig
Mm.
directly from a competition. I have read a lot of articles, of
Sure.
course, and things like and those testimonials, but I don't know
Yeah.
anyone personally. I mean, people that I know personally that have made it, they did it because they were tenacious. They did it because I know one guy who just, man, he's just crazy, but he's doing it now. But like what he ended up doing was I don't condone this at all, but this is
Uh-oh.
what he did. He found ways to get inside famous people's houses and drop his screenplays in there and jump their fences and just deliver. He did that kind of stuff, and I hear that stuff happening. That's
Whoa.
allegedly that's how the guys who made Predator got made. Got made it. They're twin brothers. Essentially, what they did is they
What?
broke into studios and they delivered their script at the producers, desks, and they leave, like they would run out or something. This is what this guy did, and then
Wow.
eventually he ended up getting a lot of notoriety and testimonials that way for his work, vouchers for his stuff somehow without getting in jail or anything like that. And now he's a working writer director. He's working on his uh, I think that's the third or fourth film, something like that.
Oh my
So
God. That's
yeah,
insane. Man,
so
you
I mean,
really
no,
mean tenacious.
yeah,
Tenacity
oh,
required. Woo!
exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's you do it anyway, but there's no one
Wow.
thing that's going to work. There's not one thing that you got to do, and then that's the thing to do. There's many different pathways. There are many different ways to get to your desired destination. The key thing is, just being that determined. Once you
Yeah.
give up, it's over. That pathway is no longer lit. If you keep going, that pathway is going to be lit, and it's going to take you wherever it's going to go. So
Yeah.
honestly, that's the honest thing about, the most honest thing I could say. I mean, I said a lot of things, but that's one of the most honest things I could say as far as trying to get a career in the arts. Just, just believe in yourself. Just really believe in your art. If you love your art, if you love the story you're telling, no doubt about it, you're probably going to go places. Maybe you won't go to the place you think you want to go to, but you'll
Hmm.
get somewhere,
Yeah.
and that's really, really important to do that. And it all stems from that, just that love of the art.
Yeah, I also wonder too, I liked when you said, if you stay on the path stays lit. I think that that's really smart. I even think about the story of the negative people you were talking about earlier. They still
Hmm.
work in the industry. They didn't get a different job. They could be in real estate if they'd like to. They could be, selling ranches to somebody. They could be working on anything, but they
Precisely.
kept going in that path, and even though they like cannot see sunlight, they're still getting the work. That is so fascinating. I really think you're right. It's like just keep to it. And the other detail that I think you brought up that was really important to remember is that like it may not be what you think you want or what you expected what was going to happen, but you have to just
Hmm.
go with where the path takes you.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different. I don't know if I can think of anything at the moment, but there are things that I've heard or read, and just honestly, just people thinking they would be A, but they ended up being B, and B ended up being the
Sure.
thing that made them what they are. But in the very beginning of this, you mentioned about having being told to write constantly, no matter what it is, just write it. And I guess
Hmm.
in regards to the novels, that's something that Stephen King would say.
Yeah.
He said basically, you're not a writer unless you write every day, which I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I do agree that you're not a writer unless you write. So
Yeah.
you just got to keep doing it. I mean, if that's what you want to do, you just do it. There are people that I've met that they were like, I would like to be a writer. I'm like, what have you written? Oh, I'd like to be a writer. I'm like, yeah, but what have you written? It's like I didn't get into what I'm doing. Simply said like I'm gonna be a writer. It's like no, I just started writing because I'm like I have the story in my head. It's just in my head. I don't want it to be in my head anymore. I wanted to get out there and show it to people and have them tell me what they think. And the very first screenplay I ever wrote was actually, to me, it was just one of those things where, again, going back to where when I was trying to do novel stuff when I was a kid and I was just getting bored. When I first started writing my first screenplay, when I determined that's what I want to do, same thing happened. I got bored. First 10 pages, I was like, I don't want to do this. And I tell this story to my friends and stuff, and it's corny, but it's absolutely true. I just told myself one day, well, listen, you either finish this or you're never going to finish this internally. So I went ahead and I just sat down. I took like the 10 or 15 pages, whatever I wrote, and I turned it to around 70. I was like, wonderful. Now what do I do? Well, let me read it. I read it, and then I'm like, well, let me try things differently. And then from that first script, I showed it to a couple of people I knew, acquaintances, not really friends. And the response was overwhelmingly positive. They were like, oh, this is cool. This is really awesome and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. So that gave me the encouragement to keep doing it. Because I was like, well, this was a lot of fun to write. And then people were like, oh, this is fun to read. I'm like, okay, great. Then maybe I should keep doing this and just perfect my craft. And that was a great thing, too, that I kept doing that because once I got that first script out there, the first 10 pages anyway, it got eviscerated by different writers and things like that. Yeah.
When you first started and you were doing the comic books, um, and
Yeah.
then you moved on to the screenplay, like how old were you when you first wrote that first screenplay? Were you like little?
I was like 21, 22, something
Oh,
like
okay.
that.
All right. I just wondered.
Yeah.
So you did comic books all through high school, all through college.
I'm doing comic books now too. I got
Oh,
back into it.
awesome.
So
Awesome.
yeah, but
Do
that's
you
kind of
just write? Do
part
you
of
do the drawing, or do you do the words and or alone and have somebody else do the drawing?
a little. Right now, I'm doing the latter more than the former. The former, I could draw, but I could draw cartoony characters and things like that. So
Yeah.
comic strip kind of like deals. But there's a personal project that I drew on my own, but I'm setting that aside because I want to get. It's kind of like the director thing. I want to get better as an artist. So, but I just don't want. But I'm having so many things I want to do. I'm being more focused. Like I'll just do writing for now. But
Yeah.
for now, as far as my comic projects, I'm just hiring other illustrators for the moment, and I have like one that's almost done. I got another one that's going to be in production fairly soon. And then I have two additional ones that are later down the line. So the great thing about comics is that, especially in the case of me where I'm just writing it and I'm just kind of like shipping out to someone else to do the illustrations, all I got to do is write that script. And comic scripts are very short.
Yeah.
And you just got to be as, detailed as you can, to the point. And then once you ship it out there to the artists, and then you just wait for them to do their thing, and then you just move on to your thing while you wait on them. So and usually it takes a few days to maybe a week, and then they give you results, and you give them notes or whatever, depending on who you're working with. And then before you know it, you have a comic book, and you're like, oh, fantastic. And the only thing that about creating comics, though, is that it costs money if you have to do that. In my case, I have to pay my artists for their time and their work. Because I believe whenever possible, I try to pay artists because it's such a hard medium, and occasionally, especially in the case of a short film I'm going to be doing pretty soon, everything is favor-based, and I just at least try to pay for food and drink and things like that and make gas money.
Yeah.
But if I can pay a full rate, then I will. In the case of the comics, I do. I set aside money for that because it's a lot of money, because it's a lot of time to do something like that. So whenever possible, you just pay it back in some sort of way. Because a big thing, especially around here, is like, oh yeah, thanks for all this work. How about we give you a credit? I'm like, that's wonderful, but how can I pay my bills? How can I pay for this and that with just a credit? Credit's great, don't get me wrong, but can we have a little bit more?
Yeah.
So that's just a very difficult thing.
Are you printing and publishing the comic books?
I plan on doing that, like a very limited print run and then a digital kind of release. Yeah, because that's the kind of like the world we live in. Because I'm also going back to what I was saying. Just keep it. Just read up on what's happening right now. And the comics industry is kind of going through like a thing at the moment, especially among indie artists. So unless you're like really like Cyanide and Happiness or something, one of the biggest web comics or comic books out there, you're gonna struggle. I know a guy who's a writer as well, and he has a comic, and his comic, he ordered like a bunch of copies of his comic, and they still sit in his house unsold. It's a very, very difficult market, and his comic in particular was based on a very well-known property in the public domain, but it's still having a very hard time, pushing units. So that's something I'm very aware of. So that's why I'm like, but I still want to do printing because that's kind of like my roots as a child. Yeah. That's what I loved growing. I loved comics. I was not necessarily a superhero comic fan. I like the movies and stuff, but I love the little indie comics and the cartoon comics, growing up and stuff. That's kind of like what I like doing, and that's what I'm doing on the side as a passion thing, pure passion thing.
Have you ever thought about writing a screenplay for an animated movie?
Oh yeah, all the time, especially when I was a kid. But animation is just so difficult to get off the ground.
Sure.
That's like a different monster entirely. But it's something I would love to do in the future, though, once I have the opportunity.
But that's like if you had to do it all yourself. If you write the script and sell it, then you sell it. You don't have to do it.
Oh yeah, totally. There's that as well. I think with me, I'm more interested in selling things that are live action because I feel like there's more of a market for that.
Yeah, right.
Whereas if you do something,
You're right.
Yeah, but I feel like if you were to do animation, I think it's more viable if you do the animation yourself. Like a lot of these animations that I see, especially the stuff you see in the Academy Awards or Sundance or whatever, a lot of these people that wrote them, they also directed them, they also animated them, they did the rendering, they owned the programs, they had like the 5,000 plus hours to do all that stuff, and it was just like, wow. They basically were a one-man show or one-woman show, whatever, one-person show.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's just like, but again, that's something I would love to get into, though. Just, somewhere down the line, especially. But I feel like, especially if you're trying to make it in filmmaking, the best thing you should do is just research. If you want to make a career out of it, research what people are responding to the most, and then make something of that particular genre that you like. That's, again, another lesson I learned from Sam Raimi. What Evil Dead wasn't, from what I understand anyway, Evil Dead wasn't the product of something that he loved as a kid, and he's like, I'm going to do this. Now I'm finally going to do it. Like, no, he wanted to make movies in general, and he was like, he did research based on drive-in theaters at the time, and he's like, oh, most people like horror films, and horror films are economical. Therefore, I will do a horror film. That's how he operated, and that's how the Evil Dead became a thing.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, and that's still true today, horror is still one of the most profitable genres, and I think it's even cheaper now than it was then. I love found footage films specifically, like Blair Witch and all that stuff. So I'm like, I want to do that. So honestly, just find out what's popular or somewhat popular, and just find a genre that you like or subgenre from that, and just write something like that. Find out, okay, this is what people are into. What do I like in this genre?
Is
Okay,
that
I
how
like
you
this.
do it though, or do you have like
Mhm.
specific ideas that you have rolling around in your head and you just one by one pluck them out and turn them into screenplays? Or are you doing this research and going like, okay, their world needs more romantic comedies. I'm gonna write it or whatever.
Yeah, I think the latter part came later in life. When I first started doing it, I'm gonna do whatever. I'm gonna be passionate at everything. And then the first couple of things I wrote are like, there's no way in hell this shit can get made. There's no way in hell. This is like, it's too far off the grid. It's too, it's nothing that no one would want to be looking for at the moment. So it's just like, so later on I was just like, okay, well, I do want a career. That was my goal. So I'm like, well, how do I do it? Well, I'll find out. And then I started doing the research from there on. So
Yeah,
that's something I
interesting.
learned. But honestly, people operate on passion too. And sometimes people do their passion project, and oftentimes they're going to get picked up from that. And numerous examples of that happening, you
Yeah.
know. So it's great. I mean, it's great to find something that you really hold on to, no matter what it is, and just do it and just push it out there, because you never know what's going to happen. But it's also good to be aware of what's going on, and then from there, just pick something you like from it, you know, and just be like, go from there. Like you mentioned, rom-coms, comedies,
Mhm.
romance films. I mean, that there's a huge market for that as well. And if there's something you like, if there's a movie you have, and there's a spark in your mind in that particular genre, just go for it, you know?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for talking to me, Will. You've given such good sage advice for people who are starting out writing, and everybody's got to find their own path. And I really feel like you've given us a great view of your path and how it's been for you in LA. I wish you all the luck with everything that you're doing, and you seem to be working so hard. So I'm sure someday we'll see your name in lights. Or like I'm kind of wondering if that novel that you wrote's going to be the thing that makes you famous, and then I'll be reading that novel.
We'll see what happens. Thank you so much for having me, Amy. Yeah, like, no, this has been a lot of fun. I'd love, sharing my experiences. So if something happens down the line, I mean, yeah, then we should touch base and then go from there maybe next time.
Yeah, maybe if you ever come to Austin for Austin Film Festival, to show off the new movie that you made that's amazing and everyone wants to watch it, then I'll meet you
Yeah, for sure. I actually
then.
got something in competition, so fingers crossed. We'll see what happens.
Ooh,
So,
fun.
uh,
Awesome.
a
So
script, a
great.
script, not a film. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I really appreciate you being part of the podcast.
All right. Thank you again for having me, Amy. You have yourself a good day, and good luck to you in the future as well.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks for listening to Yes But Why podcast.